Welcome to the Cano Cabinet Shop. Today we're going to lay out the dovetails. Before we get started, for those of you who don't know and may be interested, these are what is called the pins, and these are what are called the tails. You can see I really messed up on this one. That's why this board got it's going to be relegated to firewood. But anyway, this is what we're going to try to lay out today. Now, some folks might say, which one do you lay out first? Do you lay out the tails or do you lay out the pins? And believe it or not, there's people who argue about that. Personally, I will lay out the tails first, but I guess there are times that you have to lay out the pins first. I haven't come to those yet, but you know, I don't know how to divide the board equally with pins like I do with tails, because tails are supposed to be pretty much the same size, unless you want to really get a little more interesting, I guess, and make them different sizes. But it's easier for me to make the tails the same size if I lay them out first instead of trying to do it with the tails. Now, in the joiner and cabinet maker, he laid out the tails first, but it doesn't say how he knew how to lay out the tails first. So since I don't know how to lay out the tails first, I'm not going to. So let's get started. Okay, to lay out our tails, we need a few tools. The first tool we're going to need is our knife, a marking gauge, a dovetail gauge, a coping saw, and one last thing I forgot is the dividers. Which are here. So, first thing we do, we take our marking gauge, and we mark out the width of the board. And I think I broke my pencil. Yep. Hazards of the job. Anyway, okay, this is the back. I swapped the front and back around because I think I like this better on the back. But the back, we make our mark a little bit heavy, and I'll get to that later. And we go around the front. We just make a light scratch. A light scratch on the front. A little heavier on the back. Okay, there we go. In the book, Thomas goes and does they'll mark the exact size of the board. Some people will leave off just a little bit so they can plane it down later, but I'll go along with let's try to do it as close as we can to the front. This is my Moxon vise, and a Moxon vise on a real workbench would raise the work up just enough to do work like this. But since my other vise would, or other bench would have a bench vise, I wouldn't necessarily need the Moxon vise, but the Moxon vise is all I got to do this job right now, so we got to use it. And when I build my joinery bench, the Moxon vise is going to be incorporated into the joinery bench, and I'll probably do that as soon as I can. But for now, we'll do it this way. Traditionally, what they would do in this little triangle here has a 1/2 inch and a 1/4 inch, because this is 3/4 inch stock. Traditionally, the 1/2 pin on each side of the dovetail is 1/3 the thickness of the board, which means we got to come in a 1/4 inch. And I'll mark that with a pencil so you can see the lines better. Let's see if we can see that. So I'll move it here so you can see the lines a little better. There we got a 1/4. We're in a 1/4 inch, and over here we're in a 1/4 inch. So what I want to do now is I want 5 tails. Now you say, how big do you need these tails, right? As many as you want. The only thing is how easy is it going to be for you to chop them up? Now, in this board, 5 tails has been looking pretty good. So that's what we're going to do. See if I can get this back in the stand. My battery on this is dying, so that's why it's a little irritating. That's why it died on me. I can't really get it any higher. Okay, I'll show you later. But so what you do is you take your dividers and you go across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you see, in this 5, it's almost at the end, so that's not going to work. So we got to go in a little bit. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, looks like I went too far. Doesn't take much. This isn't rocket science, but it's pretty close. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 5 is on the line. That's not good. So we got to do it again. Let's try this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 5 is just a little bit over that line that I made. So that's what we're going to go with. So you put it in, go 1, 2, 3, 4, and you already got your 5 here. So on this side, that must have moved something. 1, 2, 3, 4, and we got number 5. So let me pencil those in so you can see the dots. Let me put my pencil. So this is going to be the start of one tail. This is going to be the end of that. That's going to be the start of another one. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equally distant spaces. So we take our dovetail marker okay. And with our knife, what's happening here is I hit the grain, and the grain kind of pulling on it, but we're going to cut that out anyway, so it's not really a showstopper. But ideally you just do it real light scratch. Now pencil those in. It's a lot better with the sharp pencil. Oh, I mucked that one up. That's where that grain issue was. I probably should use the marking gauge, but oh well. Okay, so we laid our dovetails out. Now, in order to make sure that I don't cut out the wrong pieces when I go to cut the board out, what I'll do is I'll draw a little line just on where the pins are. And the reason for that is because it'd be less of a mess on the board. If I drew a pencil all the way across, then I'd have a lot more places to clean up. In the half pins, I mark all the sides. Oop. Okay, and that's how we lay our dovetails out. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tails. They're all pretty much uniform, and so that looks like that's going to be a good job.